Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Ultimate Fights breakdown. And for any who are perhaps new to this series, basically what we do in Ultimate Fights is we take two iconic or sometimes underappreciated or misunderstood movie characters, generally of an action or horror style nature, and we discuss what could happen, theoretically of course, and that's probably for the most part all it will ever be for the majority of these fights, if, by some magic and wonder, these two icons, generally of horror, went up head to head. Now we've discussed Alien versus The Thing, we've discussed Tremors versus Predator. This time we're going for something which is revisiting one of those characters that we've discussed before, but putting it up against a creature which many people don't think of. It's a severely underappreciated horror creature, and in my opinion, it's one of the best, if not the best, of the severely underappreciated horror movie monsters, in terms of how difficult it is to beat, and just how awesome it is when you really think about it. Now, our ultimate fights for today is The Thing, which, as I mentioned, we have discussed before. We put it up against Alien and discussed what could happen if those two icons were to meet, which could potentially be a very interesting fight, and perhaps not as cut and dried as you might expect. This fight, though, I think is even more interesting, because I honestly don't know who would win. There are three horror movie creatures in particular which are very, very difficult to beat and or kill. And as far as I'm concerned, they are The Thing, the Blob, and Splinter. Now those three creatures are almost unkillable. And the majority of the films that they've been featured in, if not all of them, they were featured in situations where the amount of people that had to go up against them were relatively few. There was really nowhere that the creature could go. The Thing, for instance, in all versions of The Thing, it's isolated. In all versions of the Blob, it's isolated to a small town or area. And Splinter, being conceptually the newest of the three, is also set, for any who have not seen the movie, in a very specific, enclosed location. Now, without spoiling anything, the ending of Splinter is open. It leaves a lot of room for further thought. And I would strongly recommend, I would almost beg you, and I don't even work for the company, but I feel like I wish I did, I would beg you, please, if you are a fan of horror movie monsters, and underappreciated but brilliant horror movies, please try to check out Splinter. It's a 2008 horror movie. It made such a tiny amount of money, it is a crime as far as I'm concerned. It made something like $460,000 at the box office, which is ridiculous. It's one of the worst performing horror movies ever made, but it's better than 90% of the garbage that comes out in the horror genre. There's a tiny cast, set predominantly in one location, but it is brilliant. I cannot stress that enough. It's one of my favourite films of recent years, horror or otherwise, and it's fantastic. It's flawless as far as I'm concerned. It's brilliant. Now, to some degree, I'm going to spoil the character of Splinter. I'm not going to spoil the story, but we're going to take that character and put it up against The Thing. And to some degree, if you haven't seen any versions of The Thing, I will be spoiling that character as well. Not the movies, but just the character itself. Now, as we've already discussed, The Thing is an alien life form, a parasite, if you will, that can take on the form through assimilation of virtually any known living thing that it comes into contact with. Now, many people automatically put The Thing up against its nearest natural rival, the Blob, because the Blob, in a very similar way, very quickly can do away with whatever it touches. But the crucial difference between The Thing and the Blob is that The Thing predominantly assimilates the person, not necessarily just to eat them, but to become them, to blend in, to take over quietly. whereas the Blob doesn't really have that level of intelligence. The Blob is much more of a primal monster. Essentially, the Blob doesn't actually assimilate anyone, it just digests them. It's like a big lump of acid that's sentient. So it's an obvious choice to put it up against the Thing. Now potentially either one of those would have a good chance in a fight, but many people don't think of putting this rival up against the Thing. So for any who have not come across Splinter before, are unfamiliar with the creature, what it can do, etc., which apparently is a lot of people based on how little money it made, Splinter is essentially a fungus. It's a spore, if you will, with spiky spines like splinters, hence the name, sticking out all over it. It grows on various plants and trees, and whatever it sticks a spike into, in other words, whatever comes too close to it and brushes up against it, it infects. And once a creature, human, animal, whatever, has been brushed up against the spines of Splinter, they become infected with it. And it essentially zombifies them, but in such a way that they become a beautiful, in such a ghastly and almost formless way. Almost like the Thing itself, actually. This creature that moves in an unhuman way is attracted predominantly to heat, but also to sound and movement, and basically just wants to eat. It wants to spread itself to as many life forms as possible. But the really interesting thing about Splinter, and why I think it would be a fantastic rival for the Thing, is because all it needs to do is touch you. You only need to have the slightest scrape from Splinter and you'll instantly be infected by it. And it takes you over very quickly. Within a couple of minutes or sometimes even seconds, it will take you over. And in a very similar way to the Thing, any body part that comes into contact with Splinter gets a mind of its own. And that actually happens in the movie, but again, I won't spoil anything. So in other words, if you get stung by Splinter, whatever part of you that got stung now gives you a choice. Are you going to keep that body part and potentially have it spread to all of you, or are you going to remove the body part, but then ironically enough have to fight that body part because it's now become your enemy? In a very similar way to the Thing. That's very similar to what the Thing does. Now the reason I would like these two monsters to go head to head is very simple. I would love to see what could happen. Now in terms of rivaling each other, there wouldn't necessarily be a strict rivalry. The Thing would have no real reason to attack Splinter because Splinter doesn't really have any intelligence. It's a very primal creature, like the Blob. As I said earlier, it's attracted to heat, sound, and movement. It doesn't really have a world-dominating plan. Ironically enough, it kind of does, but not by choice. That's just what it's programmed to do naturally, like a virus. Whereas the Thing makes decisions. Initially, the Thing became an alien life form and caused that life form to crash to Earth. Then, when it was thawed out, later on, it decided that the best thing to do was become the humans in the area and try to take over quietly, or in the newer movie, in a bit more of a bum-rushing kind of way. Now, a lot of people dislike that about the newer version of the Thing. The reason why I actually like that is because that film is a prequel. And of course that's the first time that the Thing has ever had contact with humans. So of course it's going to attack them outright. It doesn't know any better. Whereas by the time John Carpenter's film comes around, which technically happens after the original movie, it's learned that that isn't the way to beat humans. Just bum-rushing them and attacking them is not a clever way to do it, because although humans aren't particularly strong on their own, their intelligence means that they will figure out a way of beating it. And so by the time the 1982 movie rolled around, it had learned that it needed to use more covert tactics. And I like that. A lot of people view that as a flaw in the newer film. I think it's good. It shows that the Thing can learn. Splinter, on the other hand, doesn't have that kind of story arc. We're not given any inkling whatsoever throughout the entire film that Splinter has anything more than just a primal urge to infect whatever living thing is near to it. But I love that. You don't want to have two creatures which are equal going head to head. There's no point. You need to have a difference there to make it interesting. So the interesting difference for me is the thing is intelligent and deadly. Splinter is primal and deadly. So what would happen when the two went head to head? Well, as for which one would infect which, we honestly can't say, because as far as I know, nobody has ever put Splinter up against the Thing based on any kind of DNA or genetic reasoning, so we don't know which one would win. Splinter has a good chance, the Thing has a good chance. I think most people would probably assume that the Thing would win, because it's been presented as being a formidable monster, and because more people have seen the Thing and find it easier to support it. And I completely understand that. The Thing is my favourite franchise of all time. But I don't want to give short shrift to Splinter, because Splinter, in one movie alone, has shown itself to be a fantastically formidable monster. Now, the way I see the story panning out is not just based around the concept of seeing these monsters go head to head, because as cool as that would be, I want more than that. I don't just want to see them have a brawl, because as fun as that would be, you need to have something more to be invested in. So what I want to see compounded on top of that is something which we've never seen before. Think about it. Any of you guys who have seen multiple versions of the Thing, maybe you've seen Splinter as well, you'll probably notice that on every single occasion, as I mentioned early on in this video, they are always in confined areas. There are very few people to deal with. It's a very confined environment with extreme weather conditions and whatnot that prevent them basically from leaving the area. Now with Splinter, that's not so much the case, but the problem for Splinter is, due to the way its anatomy works, Splinter cannot move on its own. Like I said, it's a fungus. The only way that Splinter can move is if it infects something living. So it's limited in that way, whereas the Thing, at whatever level, can just keep going in a different form. Even down to, as we saw in the movies, the blood itself can move. So I want to see a situation where we take these iconic monsters and put them into a higher stakes situation. Now the problem with the Thing, and for any who haven't seen it, the problem with Splinter as well, is they're such fast acting and formidable monsters. They devour their environment so quickly that as soon as you put them in a heavily located area, such as a city, you can forget it. It's game over instantly. They will destroy humanity within a couple of days. They spread so quickly. It's like a virus, but with a mind. Now what I want to see is somewhere between the two. I don't want it to be set up in a ridiculously overpopulated area, but at the same time I want to see something new. I want to see the Thing in a situation where we haven't seen it before. So here's my concept, if you will. For any who haven't played the game version of the Thing on the PlayStation 2 from 2002, I believe it was, which, by the way, if you're a fan of it, you should definitely play. It's a brilliant game. I'm about to spoil the plotline of the game. Not completely, but if you don't want to hear it, then skip forward a little bit to the time shown here. But if you don't care, stick around. The difference with the game, and the game itself was endorsed by John Carpenter, and he actually appeared in the game in a cameo, shows a very different story to that shown in the film. Because in the film, the Thing is presented as being a purely chance accident. People come across it in the ice, it thaws out, it begins attacking them, they have to survive, etc. In the game, the storyline is different. Because in the game, you play as a soldier who comes to the site after the events of the films. And the difference is, in the game, not only do you have to worry about what the Thing is trying to do to you, but you also uncover the fact that the government knows it's there, and they're trying to harvest it. They're trying to weaponize the Thing. They're trying to make it controllable and essentially a bioweapon. Now I think that is an awesome storyline. It's kind of cliched, but it's never really been done with something as formidable as the Thing before. The concept of making that subject to your will, that's a terrifying concept, and for the game it works perfectly. Now what I want to see is, I want to see, not necessarily a long way down the line, but I'd like to see maybe a few months after the events of the John Carpenter film, which of course predated the 2011 film in terms of the timeline. I want to see, let's just say 3 months down the line for the sake of it, maybe 6, maybe 4, whatever, but I want to see a portion of the Thing, a wrist of someone, a hand, an arm, whatever, that's been taken away from the site. Let's say the site has been napalmed or whatever to cover it up, but this piece of the Thing has been taken by the government, exactly as it would be in real life, for studying. That is exactly what would happen. So now they've taken it for testing, but I want to see it in a new location. I want to see the Thing in a location which adds more stakes, but at the same time has the isolation that the best horror movies have. Think The Thing, think Alien, think Splinter. Locations where the humans involved cannot escape. That creates the best level of threat. So, I want to see a government location based on something like an oil rig in the middle of the ocean. Maybe the cold ocean, near to where the film itself was set, but the ocean nonetheless. Now, I personally find deep underwater movies to be just very easily creepy. They don't even have to do much, they're very claustrophobic. The sounds, the colours, everything is dulled and creepy. I love it, it's so atmospheric. And in the game version of the Thing, you actually go in one portion of the game into a submersible and you have to fight different versions of the Thing that are lumbering around down there, around blind corners and inside doors on this creaky old submarine. It's a really atmospheric point in the game and it works beautifully. So what I would like to see is this government location on this oil rig type platform with, of course, an underwater section, maybe where they keep all these different bioweapons and samples of various things, and they've got the Thing down there, or at least a portion of it. They're trying to study it, to learn how it works and whatnot, but they've just brought in another specimen, a specimen that has been overrunning the forests of wherever it was in the Splinter movie. I can't recall if we're told where the movie's set, but it's set very clearly in an area which is covered in trees. It's a very dense forest. That's where Splinter is. So they get this sample of Splinter and they take that to this place as well. Not necessarily at the exact same time as the Thing, but it gets taken there. Now what I want to see is, of course, something goes wrong. And strictly speaking, in this film, there wouldn't really be any good guys, because all of the guys at this secret location are essentially trying to create weapons. But that doesn't mean that you can't have people to root for. Some of the best movies have villains that are great to root for. And so I would love to see a situation where the workers, the scientists, the guys who are just training, maybe some military guys as well, have to contain this breach where the Thing has escaped, Splinter has escaped. Maybe those are the only two test subjects there which really matter. Maybe they've got some other experimental viruses and whatnot, but maybe these two things are the deadliest. The Thing is extraterrestrial and deadly. Splinter is seemingly terrestrial. It seems to come from Earth, but it's deadly and it's unknown. So they've got these two really deadly top-tier potential weapons there, and a few others which are deadly but are more traditional viruses, diseases, etc. Stuff that doesn't have a mind of its own. And they escape. Maybe even the Thing itself causes Splinter to escape, because the Thing is smart enough to do that. And the Thing would also be very good at evaluating how good its opponents are. it learns very quickly between the space of the two films how to deal with humans more effectively. So it would instantly know that Splinter is potentially a good unintentional ally. Now, Splinter doesn't seem to have any form of intelligence, but that works to the Thing's favour, because the Thing doesn't need a smart ally, it just needs a stupid ally that will allow it to escape. So let's say when Splinter and the Thing are taken out for testing, maybe there's some kind of a breach and they escape, or the Thing, whatever causes Splinter to escape. I don't know how it would work, I haven't written it or anything, but something like that occurs. They escape, and then the obvious thing is the military, the scientists, etc. have to survive. And I imagine it as having a very similar atmosphere to the game, because if you haven't played the game, as I said, the atmosphere is incredible. It's the best thing about the game. The graphics aren't amazing, but it translates through that really well. And that's what I'd like to see. A location where there are more people involved, so it ups the stakes, but also ups the stakes in a different way. Because if the Thing, Splinter to some degree, but primarily the Thing, if it escapes this facility, not only is it now in the ice, now it's in the open ocean. And once it gets into open water, you can kiss goodbye to humanity, because there's no way you can beat it then. As soon as it touches a single fish, it's game over. Because once it's got one fish, that fish gets eaten by something else, which gets eaten by something else, which gets eaten by something else, and eventually you've got whales, squids, octopus, fish, sharks. Everything's the Thing. Single shark bite to a surfer, now the surfer's the Thing, you see how it would spread. So it ups the stakes, but still has it in environments which allow for claustrophobic, atmospheric horror. So overall, that's what I'd like to see. And as I said at the start, although I'd love to see it, I don't know who would win. Technically speaking, you want the humans to win, but realistically we want to see the monsters go head to head. So, that's it for what I would love to see in this particular Ultimate Fight Showdown. And as always, feel free to slap down below what Ultimate Fights you would love to see, and also what are your thoughts on this, particularly of course if you've seen at least one of each movie, if you're familiar with the Thing and with Splinter. Who do you think could potentially win? But that's it overall for this particular Ultimate Fight. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.